Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about patch 1.2.5 for Rivals of Aether 2. This one was a pretty big one. Sorry, I'm a little bit late, but I just wanted to play the game a little bit and actually feel how these changes were implemented on the characters, because there was a lot of general gameplay changes, and then there was 4 characters that got a lot of attention. You have Zetterburn with a handful of nerfs, Ranno with a handful of nerfs, Wrastor with the rework, Krag with a handful of nerfs, and then a bunch of other characters really just got their wall jumps adjusted. So we're going to be going over all of that in today's video. There's a new Olympia skin as well. Make sure you use code ProofBlock if you're going to pick that up, and let's get right into it. So first things first, we got the general changes. They also changed the blast zones on Fire Capital and Godai to make them slightly smaller off the side for Fire Capital and off the top for Godai. And you will feel these changes, but they're not that significant relative to the rest of the patch. You're going to have the tumble threshold change slightly, so it's a little bit easier now to get sent into tumble, making floor hugging a little bit worse. And they have nerfed floor hugging in this patch. Now, it might not seem like that with this initial note of floor hugging no longer requires a timed input. So in order to do the floor hug itself, it is going to be easier now, but strong attacks will now always send it to knockdown when floor hug, so you can't floor hug strong attacks now even at those lower percents. And floor hugging will cause you to take extra damage at the end of hit pause, and I'm a really big fan of this change. So I believe they said in the stream that they made, it was like 1.25 damage. I don't know how much it is exactly, but taking more damage from opting to floor hug as a defensive tool, I think is a really good way to balance it, because as they were saying in the stream a lot, like, you know, you are still getting hit when you opt to go for the floor hug, but usually you just don't really care about that because you get hit and then you get to hit your opponents. But if you're constantly going for floor hugs to try to hit your opponents afterwards, obviously you're going to be knocked out of that floor hug percentage pretty early here, because you are taking that little bit of extra damage. So if it's a tool you're over abusing, you're not going to be able to use it as much, because that damage is racking up a little bit faster. And just in general, it's a tool that you're not going to be able to use as much now, just because they've made it so more things are sending into tumble. Now it's easier to get sent into knockdown rather than just floor hug the option. Next big change is going to be to waveland. They shaved off 2 frames, making it 8 frames instead of 10. And to compensate for this, they made it so that waveland grab will now have a 2-frame cooldown as well. So doing a waveland into a grab is the same input as it was before, still 10 frames, which I think is really good. That did not need to make that stronger. But I think making movement in general stronger, definitely something that I can advocate for. Holding the joystick downward after someone hits your shield is no longer a buffer shield drop if you haven't released down yet. That's just really a quality of life change. Shield dropping will no longer cap your horizontal speed. And I think this is the second biggest change of this patch. And I might be like reading it wrong, and it's actually something else in the patch that is allowing this, but this is allowing some crazy movement off of platforms. And I've seen specifically Clarion players and Ranno players getting some pretty intense stuff out of it, but I think any character in the game can get value out of this tech. Wrastor as well, I've seen some people. I'll put some stuff on the screen right now while I'm talking, just to kind of exemplify some of the movement that you are able to get with this stuff. And then if it's not this specific tech that is allowing you, or rather the specific change that is allowing you to get this movement tech, please let me know in the comments, just so I could correct myself. But I'm pretty sure it is this change to shield dropping that allows people to just slide off the platform and do some pretty incredible stuff. Performing a grounded aerial attack, or a grounded attack on the last frame before leaving a platform, will now perform a run off aerial instead. So again, really just a quality of life change, where maybe you would get stuck on the platform. Now you wouldn't. Baby dash will now lose half of its speed when canceling into shield. That's definitely going to be something that slightly hurts people that are like really good at those micro inputs of baby dash, but I don't think it's like super significant. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. Many wall jump vertical speeds have been adjusted. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. Air dodges will now start falling 2 frames earlier, so making this defensive tool act a little bit better, or maybe I guess arguably a little bit worse if you're trying to use it as like specifically a recovery tool. Sliding off a ledge backwards while shielding will now only put you into 25 frame ledge slip if you were previously in shield. So I think this is like if you're hitting someone's shield kind of well to their edge of a platform. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Gravity will no longer ease in during, or gravity will no longer ease in during the early knockback frames, and I don't really know what this means. So this mechanic was originally added to make characters spend more time in the air before landing. Now that we have the dynamics ECBs, this happens naturally, so this mechanic is only okay. So this is just like a quality of life change, or not a quality of life change, but just a game design change that they no longer really needed. No, my patches! And then right towards the end here, we've only got a couple more changes. Now, downward sending moves will now adjust the tumble threshold to a minimum of 0.75, its original value. Because the downward sending attacks are generally weaker for off-stage balance reasons, they often don't send opponents into tumble until fairly high percents. This change should make them feel more natural when sending into knockdown. Again, I think this is something to do with kind of the floor hugging changes, just making things send into tumble more so. So if you remember when Rivals of Aether 2 first came out, everything in that move or in that game sent you into tumble. You were just playing a tech chasing simulator pretty much. In the newest patch, it feels a little bit more like that. It's definitely not as bad as it was, but there is a lot more tech chasing. There is a lot less opportunity to floor hug. You're going to be sent into tumble more often than not. And I like the game feel of it so far. It's only been a day, so we'll have to see and at the top level implications of that as well. But I do like the direction that they've taken with this patch. And then finally, attacks that send you away from the character will now deal more knockback when sending the opponent upward, with a maximum of 1.11 knockback when sending straight up. So I guess if you get like the right hitbox, like if you're like perfectly under Zetterburn or something, if he punches you straight up, you're going to be taking a little bit more knockback there. And then attacks with variable knockback angles will now send opponents into tumble at consistent percents regardless of the angle they sent the opponents. And then also minimum joystick dead zone setting. So a lot of changes here. The big changes that you need to understand are the floor hugging changes. It's just different now. Floor hugging is going to be a lot easier to do, but it's also going to be something that you're not going to be able to do as frequently. They've made wave landing a little bit better. Again, there's that crazy movement off the platforms that I've shown you. Hopefully, I've shown you a couple of clips on Twitter, and those people will be linked below if I put their clips on screen. But overall, for the general changes, I think they're pretty good. I like changing movement to make it a little bit stronger, and I like nerfing floor hugging a little bit. Moving on to those character-specific changes, starting off with Zetterburn. He is going to have his general movement toned down a little bit. His max horizontal jump speed is now 2 units less, and his max double jump speed is now 1.5 units less, and his just general aerial acceleration is going to be taken down by 0.1 units. So he's not going to be as fast in the air. He's not going to be as good as tracking his opponents, getting those double fair follow-ups, or maybe like a back air into a down or something like that. It's just not going to be as easy for Zetterburn to get those follow-ups. Now he's not going to have that same distance. They also made his wall jump vertical speed less, but again, they did that for everyone. Uncharged neutral special radius has been decreased by 10 units, and as you can see, it is pretty significantly smaller. You're absolutely going to feel this as a Zetterburn player, and they also made the uncharged neutral special hit stun multiplier 0.1 units less, so you are going to be able to get out of this move easier now as well. But also, it's still shine. It's still the best move in the game in terms of a burst option, even if it is a little bit smaller. It doesn't take the fact away that I can down air your shield and still instantly shine you the exact same way that I was able to do it before. But now the move is going to be a little bit more precise. You're going to need to be a little bit more precise to get your good combos off it as well, just because it doesn't combo as well. I think these changes to shine are really, really good. The tool itself is still as strong as it was before, but it's just a little bit harder to actually get value out of that tool now. And before we move on to the final stuff for Zetter, I just want to hit this point again because I kind of glanced over it initially. But this is when you're doing the normal down B. You're not canceling the down B, and then you double jump out of it afterwards to get really low to the wall so you could ride the wall when you recover. Now, if you get intercepted after you do that down B, there's going to be an extra 5 frames before you can do that double jump again. So you're going to be lower to, the blast zone, maybe not able to get to that wall. And with the change to up B as well, you might not be able to get to the ledge. So I think this is a really good change. They've been doing this with a lot of characters and rivals. They did it with Ranno as well in this patch, where just rinse and repeat. If you clip the opponent once off stage, the recovery is worse the second time, even worse the third time. So you actually are rewarded for, rinse and repeating people. But the final changes to Zetterburn are going to be to his offensive tools. They made it so that forward tilt now has 3 extra frames of recovery. Not a super big deal, but obviously it sucks for Zetter players. Neutral air hitboxes have shrunk, and this is a pretty significant deal. You're not going to be as oppressive with this tool now. I know Sofilo at CEO is getting so much value out of this move by using it on the ledge and then rising with neutral air, bringing people back on the stage. You are still probably going to be able to do that now, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult to clip some of those recoveries. Neutral air multi-hits ASDI multiplier or modifier against grounded opponents has been changed by 0.5, and this allows opponents to floor hug the attack when Zetterburn is rising. Forward air, they added 2 frames of recovery. Really good change. This move absolutely needed. It's just so easy to combo into itself or really anything else in Zetterburn's kit, depending on which hit of it that you get. And it's also like one of, if not his best kill moves, just throw out in the neutral. It's just such a strong tool. Back air inner hitbox has been changed. Same thing with the tipper hitbox. And I'm not going to read the numbers here, but basically back air comboed into a bit too well into upstrung for our liking, given it also burns opponents. So we're increasing the scaling and lowering the knockback angle so that DI away is more effective. So now if you're correctly DIing for back air, you should actually be able to escape those combos into an upstrung, maybe even into something like a forward air, instead of just like you're screwed if you get hit by a back air, no matter what percent or DI you're doing. Up air chest hitbox radius has been changed, so it is now moved 30 centimeters upwards, which I don't really know the full implications of this. It might just make it easier to hit Zetterburn, when he's doing up air, or maybe changes the sour spot hitbox, now the sweet spot hitbox a little bit smaller. I'm not actually sure of the full implications of that. And then the final one, up air is now 1 frame less active, recovery adjusted to retain the previous IASA frame. So it's just not going to be as active as a move now. You're going to need to be a little bit more precise. So overall, these changes for Zetterburn, really, really good. Big fan of them. The one that hurts him the most is probably the Shine change. Like, if you're nerfing Shine, it's just a really important tool for Zetterburn. It's also, like, not as good on charge as well. It's going to be easier to get out of. So the Shine changes definitely hurt. The general movement changes as well. Those ones absolutely hurt. I think the recovery changes are going to hurt him, yes, but you're still going to have a very strong recovery for Zetterburn. If you make it to the wall, you should be making it back to the stage pretty much every single time, but now it's maybe a little bit more difficult to make it to that wall. And then the changes to like his general aerials and stuff, I don't think any of them are too significant. The back air one is probably the most annoying one, just not always having that as an auto kill move now, but it's still going to be a very strong tool. Next up is going to be Ranno, and first things first, they made it so that his hurt box is a little bit bigger. Not that big of a deal, but now you might clip him in situations where you wouldn't have before. They made it so that his run speed is 2 units less. You'll definitely feel that as a Ranno player. His initial dash is still as good as it was, so you can still move around on people. You can still waveland like a beast, but you are not going to be able to chase people down from one side of the stage to the other. Like, you're not going to be able to maybe get forward air one into just running them down to a second forward air. That's not going to be as easy to confirm into now. They also made it so that Ranno can no longer fast fall during neutral special, and this is going to be the biggest nerf for Ranno in this patch. And I honestly don't know how I feel about it, because on one hand, he probably shouldn't be able to fast fall during neutral special. It just gave him way too much mix-up when he was wielding that move, especially at the top level when you have ledge slipping being something that Ranno players are constantly doing. He was just like such an impossible person to catch in the neutral, and it was really strong as a defensive tool for him. It just didn't feel like there was a ton of like correct counterplay against someone who just had so much mix-up in their timing, both of when they want to release the projectile, but also the angle the projectile is getting released at. So by removing that, you get rid of a lot of nuance with Ranno neutral special, and as someone who plays a lot of Ranno, it feels really bad. Like, this change sucks. It just is way less fun to use needles now, but I do think that it was a change that needed to be done, or at least something needed to be done with needles, because it just was way too strong as a defensive tool. It's still a very strong defensive tool. As an offensive tool, still very strong as well. Like, if you can get the right timing for falling with needles, you're still going to be able to confirm into something like a down tilt, into a strong attack, or into a grab. But it's just going to be more difficult to do that now with Ranno. You get rid of a little bit of that nuance. And again, I don't really know how I feel about it. I think gameplay-wise, balance-wise, yeah, it's absolutely something that needs to be happening. It was really strong, but as a Ranno player, it definitely is a sucky change just to feel. They also made it so that forward special could no longer jump cancel if he gets parried, and they changed the hitbox on up special, so it's a little bit more down. Now you're able to clip Ranno's hand as he's rising. I think this is a great change. That move was pretty hard to intercept before, and it's still going to be difficult to intercept, but now if your spacing is right, you are going to be able to clip that hand. They increased his air friction by double as well. So I think what this means is after Ranno does that initial up B and he doesn't do the dive kick when he's just drifting around in the air, he has less aerial drift, which he definitely needed because he had so much drift before. Like, I think Lucius was probably the Ranno who did this the best, where he would just do that initial up B, and then it was so tough to see if he was going to try to land on the platform or just on the stage or go back to the ledge. Like, he just had so much mix-up with that, not going to have as much mix-up now. This is probably the biggest change to Ranno, this or the neutral special one. You can only spawn Poison Bubble once per airtime. So if you tongue to your bubble to try to get back to the wall and someone hits you away before you get back on stage, you're screwed now. Like, you're in a really bad spot as the Ranno player. You are going to lose that best resource. If you can't tongue to the wall, you're probably not going to be able to make it back. And I think this is a really good change. It's just like actually rewarding people for going off stage and intercepting a recovery, as opposed to just letting people do it 1,000 times over and over again. Like, for Krag, he only gets 1 pillar off stage. Thank God he only gets 1 pillar off stage, because his recovery would be undeniably the best in the game, and it arguably is still the best in the game with that. Ranno, kind of in a similar situation. When he was able to just constantly bubble, there was no risk of you not getting back to the wall. You were going to get back there every single time. Now, if you do get intercepted, you might not actually be able to make it back to stage. Big fan of that change. Poison Bubble can no longer capture players for 30 frames after being hit. And I think this is just kind of stop Ranno players from using it as like a defensive thing, from like if they're at really high percents, putting them right behind them if they're at the ledge, and then the opponent just hit them into it immediately. Basically, that's nothing happened. Well, now you're just going to go straight through that bubble. They changed the up tilt sweet spot knockback towards the higher percents, and like mid to higher percents this looks like, and this angle change makes the eye out less punishing, while the knockback changes make the move more unique across percent. So I don't really know what that's saying, but they also added 2 more frames of recovery to the tool. So it's going to be a little bit more committal now. And then finally, for Upstrong, they added 3 frames of recovery, which is something that I think they should have done a while ago, to be honest, considering that this was like a combo tool for Ranno that people were using at low percents. It's probably still going to be, but now a lot more committal, maybe not going to be able to get follow-ups out of it. And yeah, overall, I think these changes are good for Ranno. He's still a very strong character, just like Zetterburn. They're still both very strong characters, but the changes to neutral special, this is a huge, huge nerf to the character, probably the biggest one in the patch, and that change to the bubble is also definitely going to hurt him. They made it so that Wrastor now has to wait an extra 4 frames before he can continue consecutively double jumping in the air. So when you want to pressure people that are above you, you do have to wait a couple more frames before you can do those extra jumps. They also just nerfed pretty much all of Wrastor's aerial speed. So his max air friction is a little bit higher. His max air speed in Slipstream and not in Slipstream is a little bit lower. Same thing for aerial acceleration without Slipstream and with Slipstream. So he's not going to be as fast in the air. He's going to be a little bit of a faster runner, but not as fast of an initial dasher. So the speed for Wrastor has been hit here a little bit in this patch, which I do think it needed to be, but don't worry, he was compensated. They changed his tilt a little bit. They just changed the final knockback here for forward tilt. I think they changed the sweet spot knockback, so this move is a little bit weaker now. Same thing for the sour spot, and then I don't really know the full implications of this for forward tilt. Maybe it's a little bit easier to combo into now. But the good thing about these is all 3 tilts can now be jump canceled 12 frames before their IASA frame if they hit an opponent. So now you're going to be able to combo into these moves into aerials a little bit easier as the Wrastor player, which is awesome. They changed the knockback angle for neutral air 1 and neutral air 2. So instead of an angle of 65, or now it hits at an angle of 65 instead of 32, and this hits at an angle of 45 instead of 40, or maybe 40 instead of 45, I don't know. But they just changed the knockback angle for Nair, so I think Nair 2 hits slightly higher, and then Nair 1 is going to hit like a lot higher, so it's going to be practically just like a different move. If you're a Wrastor player, I would go into the lab and mess around with these changes. I can't really describe to you the difference between knockback angle 65 and 32. You're just going to have to go into the lab and see that one for yourself. But I can describe you these deck changes. Forward air startup, 2 less frames. Forward air recovery, 3 less frames. So you have 5 less frames of just forward air kind of starting up, being out now. You just get this move out quicker. Back air, 3 less frames. Up air, 7 less frames of recovery. Pretty ridiculous, but they do add 1 more frame of landing line, but 7 less frames of recovery on up air when that move was already pretty absurd. Like, that is a massive change for Wrastor. These aerials recovery decrease are intended to give Wrastor more freedom in the air. So you're a little bit slower for Wrastor, but your aerials are a lot faster. Pretty much all of your aerials are a lot faster. Forward strong front sour spot is now the sweet spot, and the forward strong sour spot hitbox radius has been increased just a little bit to compensate for the sweet spot now being another strong spot. So as you can see, I think this yellow was initially a sweet spot. Now this yellow is going to be a strong spot, and then this circle here is going to be the sweet spot. But it's going to be easier to now hit a sweet spot with the forward strong. It's the exact same thing for up strong as well. I'm going to cut myself off because I forgot to mention these changes for forward strong. They also made it so that the sweet spot and the sour spot are a little bit weaker, and the move is active for 2 less frames. So in exchange for the move being easier to hit the sweet spot for, the sweet spot's now not as good and it's not as active. And it's like the exact same thing for this change here to the up strong. As you can see, this hitbox has been made a little bit bigger and moved down a little bit in exchange for up strong not being as strong and then active for 2 less frames. They also made it so that down strong post charge startup now has 2 more frames, and this one's a pretty big change. There's now 2 more meters that you have to travel with down strong before you're able to act out of it. So if you're going for those snipes off stage with Wrastor, you got to be a little bit more careful now, or you could actually die in some of those situations. Up special early sour spot knockback has been changed, so it just doesn't send into tumble as earlier on if you're getting hit by the sour spot, which is, fine. Up special sweet spot radius has been made a little bit smaller, and they've also moved it in 5 centimeters inward, so it's now going to be harder to hit that up special as Wrastor. And then finally, or not finally, but pretty much finally, up special sweet spot knockback angle has been changed from 45 to 50. This makes up special worse at securing low percentage kills off stage, since the IN will be more effective until higher percents where it starts killing off the top. And down special now has 6 more frames of recovery, so it's going to be harder to get those tech chases now. So overall, Wrastor definitely better from this patch. They are going to make his movement a little bit worse overall, even though his run speed is better. I'd say definitely overall his movement is worse, especially considering they tackled his airspeed, and that's where you're going to be a majority of the time as a Wrastor player. They just changed how Slipstream works. If you're an aggressive Wrastor player, awesome for you. If you're not an aggressive Wrastor player, this is really, really going to hurt you. But overall, I would definitely say that Wrastor is better just because of these changes right here. These changes are so important. This up air change, 7 frames off, is ridiculous. This forward air change as well, making it frame 6, is super, super important. I think Wrastor is going to be in a very solid spot now. I don't think he's going to be the best character in the game, but he's absolutely in the conversation with these changes. And finally, we're going to have some nerfs for Krag. They made it so that his max jump horizontal speed has been changed by 2.5 units. They made it so that his max double jump horizontal speed has been changed by 1 unit. And they made it so that his aerial acceleration is 0.10 lower. And the reason here is Krag's vertical speed is among the fastest in the game, and when combined with his size, his horizontal speed allowed him to quickly control an extreme wide area of the stage. This change aims to make him feel a little bit more like a heavy character he is, while toning down his horizontal threat ranges. So for Krag, you're not going to be able to get double forward airs as easily. Like forward air into neutral special off stage for like some super early confirms, you might just not be able to get those combos anymore, which I think was definitely a very necessary change for Krag. He was just so oppressive in the air. He controlled so much space, and he is still going to be the exact same level of oppressiveness on the ground as he was before, so don't worry about that. As the Krag player in the neutral for a majority of where you're going to be playing, you're going to still be as strong, but when you're pressing people in that advantage state, it's not going to be as easy to get some of those really early stocks. They also made it so that his leg and waist hurt box radius expands slightly, so he's going to be a little bit easier to hit now. They made it so that up tilt now has 2 more frames of startup. Up tilt 1 active frames has been changed to just, there is only 1 active frame to it now, and the up tilt 2 hitbox has been shrunk slightly, so it's going to be a little bit harder to hit up tilt now. You're going to have to be more precise with that move, but you still get the exact same reward from hitting that tool, which I definitely like. They made it so that down strong sweet spot damage has been increased by 3, sour spot damage by 2, forward air sweet spot damage by 1, up air sweet spot damage by 1, and down air damage by 1. So all these moves are going to be hitting a little bit harder now, especially like his main aerials, aside from like, I guess, neutral air back air, but those ones are fast framed. Otherwise, they definitely did not need a damage buff. So with that slower airspeed of Krag, you're going to have his slower aerials also hitting a little bit harder, which I definitely like. They made it so that neutral air hit 3 knockback has been changed, so this move specifically now is just more unique. Neutral air hit 3, again, if you're a Krag player, you're just going to have to go into the lab and see what that actually means with neutral air hit 3. And then finally, and this is a pretty big thing, they made it so that down throw now has 4 more frames of recovery. So down throw isn't just going to be the auto choice automatically for Krag now. And honestly, it might still be because you do get such good tech chases from it, and his other grabs aren't like amazing, but you might see Krag players opting rather to go for up throw at those mid or earlier percents now, instead of just going for down throw every single time. Maybe forward throw and back throw for positioning as well. So overall, I think these changes are good for Krag. He's definitely a little bit weaker because of them. Like, these aerial changes are absolutely going to hurt him, but he's also a little bit stronger now when he does hit you with a tool. It's just a little bit harder for him to actually get that hit. And then the changes to everyone else are just wall jump changes. Wall jump vertical speed for Maple is a little bit less. For Fleet, it's a little bit less. For Loxodon, it's not changed at all. They just changed his forward throw. Trajectory for Arcane, a little bit less. For Forsburn, a little bit less. For Edelus, a little bit more, actually. So shout out to Edelus getting a buff. But yeah, very, very minor changes. You might feel them, but probably not. And as always, we've got the end of patch tier list, and you're going to have the characters in neutral who really just got wall jump changes. You have Ranno alone in good tier. Now, the reason Ranno's not in the real good tier is because of that neutral special change and just how it feels as a Ranno player. As a Ranno player, really, really just sucks. It just really sucks to feel that change to neutral special. You take out a lot of, I think, the fluidness that you had when you were playing Ranno by getting rid of that, which is definitely unfortunate. But on the other hand, as someone not playing Ranno, as someone spectating the game, or just overall game feel, big fan of that change. It just makes that tool that was way too strong defensively a little bit more manageable as the opponent. And then the rest of the changes for Ranno, really big fan of. I think the change to up B is great. I think the change to his down B off stage is amazing. I'm a huge fan of that one. I like adding extra recovery on up tilt and especially on up strong as well. So I think all of the changes are good for Ranno. Even the neutral special change, I think, is good for Ranno. But just as a Ranno player, it feels awful, that neutral special change. It's really, really unfortunate. So that's the only reason he's in the good tier, just for sympathy towards those Ranno mains. But let's not be dramatic. Your character is still broken. And then you're going to have the real good changes for Zetterburn. Really happy with these Zetterburn changes. I feel like they addressed like every big issue with the character. They made Shine a little bit weaker. They made his recovery a little bit weaker. They make it so it's a bit harder to confirm into up strong. Back air isn't as good of a tool. Big fan of those changes for Zetterburn. Also, really big fan of these changes for Krag. I think Krag is in like the perfect spot now. I think he was in a pretty good spot before, but now I think he's in like a really good spot where you're not going to be able to get some of that aerial pressure that he was getting before that was absurd with like forward air into a neutral special, something like that off stage. He's not going to be as much of a Goliath there. He's still in the neutral going to be an absolute demon because his initial dash speed and ground speed is so strong, but when you have him in the disadvantage state or when he's trying to like run you down, pressure you in the air, he isn't going to be as oppressive. Big fan of that. And then Wrastor, I'm also a really big fan of this rework, kind of taking away the focus of just this character needs to confirm into up strong or not up strong, into up B, and he'll kill you at like 70% once he does that, but that's all he does. Now you make up strong and forward strong a little bit better tools. You make it so Wrastor's a lot more interactive in the neutral as well. That change to side B is like the best change they've had to the patch in a very long time. Like, I think Wrastor got the changes the best in this patch, not that this tier is in any order. And speaking of stuff that's not in order, I also just want to show my overall feel for Rivals of Aether 2. None of these are within order, but I think these are like the tiers of how strong characters are. You've got the real good tier with Maple, with Olympia, with Zetter, Ranno. Yes, even after the nerfs, I still think they are up there with the best of the best. And with Wrastor now, with his changes, you're going to have the good tier with Orcane, Krag, Zetterburn, and Clarence. I think all these characters could be in the real good tier, but there's like one or two weaknesses that is kind of stopping them from being up with these guys. And then you finally got these three characters of Fleet, Lockstone, and Airiels. Again, not in any order. And these are just like your normal characters in Rivals of Aether 2. And I think they're in a pretty good spot. I think Fleet is the best character in the game in terms of balance. I think she's in an amazing spot. I think Airiels is in a really good spot. He's like really, really close to being perfect. I think Clarence is pretty close to being perfect. I think Lockstone could use a couple adjustments. Like, I don't really know what they're going to do with neutral special, how they're going to work that out, but I think he's close to a good spot. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I think Rivals 2 is in a really good spot right now. I'm really happy with this patch. I think they might still need to touch on Ranno, but I think Zetterburn is in a way better spot now. He still might be one of the best characters in the game, but he's a lot less oppressive. There's a lot more counterplay against him. And yeah, overall, very happy with this patch. I hope you are too. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Sport has been absolutely unreal. Like anything I left out, got wrong, or if you want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.